Welcome back, episode 11, Never Settle podcast. And we thought we'd jump into sort of a different kind of direction today. We're going to talk a little bit more about the business side of things, and we've been having conversations amongst the three of us, and input from friends and family, and just thinking about some bigger picture things. How does faith affect our branding? How does it affect the types of mentors we seek out and the counsel that we get, and kind of all these topics? And it's a really tangled environment where we're trying to impact the world for the kingdom and for our set of beliefs, and ultimately that means loving our neighbor and making the world a better place. um, but the environment is difficult in that there's so much stereotype, there's so much religion, there's so much negative connotations to kind of that approach. And so an interesting question that was posed to us recently is how much does your belief system trickle through into your branding, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? And we've been kind of just starting to talk about that, and then it's a fertile area for exploration. But we thought we might go into that, and we're also sort of in the process of considering who we're going to approach to ask to be on our board. And so we're looking at what kind of men do we want and women do we want in our lives having input into something that we value very highly and feel like we are responsible for as stewards of this company, and our skills and talents and resources. So just kicking it off with sort of that big high level, this is the theme for the day, and have some verses that we've kind of started looking at to speak into that for our own instruction. But lots to discuss there. Who knows where this is going to go? Could be a rabbit trail day. Um,
Yeah, I
there it
think
is.
no, that's a great overview. I think the interesting part was that we were presented with feedback, or even I would say a pushback, and um, people telling us, "Hey, the Never Settle brand comes across very Christian-y," and especially if people were to dive in and really see what you're doing between the podcast and other things, and then we started asking, like, is that a bad thing? And obviously, I think there's a lot of stereotypes that we hate that come along with the words Christian, but at the same time, there was a piece of me that really got excited about it and said, like, hey, if someone's going to draw a line and it's absolutely clear which side of the kingdom I'm on, I'm totally cool with that. Now, the question is, where's that right balance between, do we just allow ourselves to fall within a stereotype, or is there something we can do that speaks more truth and gives more glory to God? But there was a part of me that kind of got like, great, let's keep going down that path, because I like the idea of not being on the fence or being wishy-washy, but people being very clear and understanding where my beliefs sit and kind of the foundation of Never Settle.
And it's interesting too because we've kind of talked about this. I mean, we had a sort of a deliberate process, even trying to decide whether to put the podcast on our main company website or not. And we went back and forth. We had arguments for either approach. Should the podcast stand on its own? Should it be almost something that we view as a ministry side of things, or should it have its own entities, if you will? And I think we landed basically, well, obviously it's on our website, so we kind of landed it with the perspective that everything is connected. It's all one life. I mean, I think in our society we compartmentalize things. Okay, this is work, and this has come up before. You don't talk about politics, religion, whatever that kind of taboo is in your work environment or whatever. And I think we kind of feel very strongly the opposite direction, that life is an integrated whole thing, and nothing. The minute you disconnect something from something else, you start to lose authenticity. You start to lose the benefits that they feed into each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so how do we keep it authentic, and is it our responsibility to differentiate for people a stereotypical Christian word or label that's placed on us and how we view truth and God, or is that not our responsibility?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna jump in, Shaw. I got something too, but go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole topic is very interesting to me because, yeah, when I step back and look at us, like obviously if you dig at all, you're gonna make those connections. And I think some people care to dig and some people don't. And then yeah, that like set of stereotypes that come along with it, like, oh, you're a Christian company, and it's just like, I don't know. like we were kind of talking about it offline or in an email or something, and it's like I don't know if I'd label ourselves like Christian company or whatever, but like I definitely would label us as like a kingdom minded company. Like we base a lot of decisions, most all of them off like, or we try to base them off the word and what it says to do, and like making sure that we're obedient to Father, like during our business like transactions and interactions and communications and relationships. And so like yeah, I don't know if it's our responsibility to like um I don't know, like how do you kind of like get like help people define the label they'd like to give us or
Hmm.
whatever. Like it's
Right.
just like I wasn't really even thinking about it. It's just like yeah, it's clear, and there's some things that yeah, if I was gonna we have products in the pipeline or that we're thinking about creating that we might not attach the never settle like name to, and not because we don't want to like it's not like it's not a never settle thing. It just makes more sense to even just be like more blunt about what the product is and its name and things like that. But like I was even thinking on those things like if someone were to go to the about tag or just dig through that site a little bit, they're gonna find us and like um, I don't know, like I like the idea of like you said, Ken, like the kingdom being attached to us. Like I hope people view it like that, and like yeah, like you can kind of tell by our client list a little bit too. Like, but it's not that we don't do work like, yeah, and we have done work for like non-faith based things. But it's just like a lot of our stuff happens to be faith based. I don't know. It's labels are definitely
Yeah,
flying.
I
it's super interesting because, sorry, don't forget what you're going to say though, Ken. Because I mean, I appreciate this outside perspective and even having the topic raised because it's not something I would have naturally thought introspectively to try to look from the outside and say, hey, how if I was a total if I'm coming across our own site for the very first time with no context, what am I going to perceive? And so that was so rich, and I think that feedback was so valuable to me to try to look at it that way. And I think where the teeter totter is there is an element of and how much do we try to protect the impression, right? So you're making an impression, and some people would immediately write that off and say, oh, they're just a Christian company or whatever kind of company, even though we wouldn't ever label ourselves that way. Um, how much do we try to protect those first impressions, or do we just trust that the right doors are going to open when they're supposed to open, as well as there's the kind of the general passion in all of us to just do excellent work regardless of what labels people try to attach to it, and let that speak for itself, and then let that be a testimony and a witness. And so there's this weird balance between um, how do we engage a secular world that is becoming more polarized against sort of traditional values and morality and ways of doing things, and do we worry about turning potential markets off by a bold kind of faith-based approach to our communications and our identity.
mhm. And I would say kind of the heart of this podcast was that we wanted to bring internal discussions publicly and give a view into how we solve problems. So I think this is probably one of the better ones where we were presented with an opposing view, not an opposing view, but an idea to make a change. And so today we're really discussing what's that change going to be, and we're either going to continue down as we are, we're going to make a change, or we'll completely abandon this stuff. And so with that in light, as I'm thinking about this stuff, I'm leaning more and more towards, I think that if there's a area for improvement that we can make, we should do that. Like if we're confronted with something and we see a place where we can make an improvement, I think we should. And I do think that there's probably a few tweaks that we can make in our messaging and our public kind of face to help take away stereotypes and really point to the King and give glory to God in a way that's honorable to Him. And I think that's the heart of it. Is we want to whatever we do, we want it to be honorable to Him, regardless of what we feel about it. It's are we bringing honor to Him? And so I think there's a couple things we could do within that. And then there's the other piece of me where I feel like we don't need to do too much, because at the end of the day, it's not our job to convince people. And if people write us off or they don't want to do business because they make a quick stereotype and don't give an opportunity to let our work speak for itself, I'm I'm in this camp where I'm leaning like it doesn't matter to me because that's not my job to convince them. And so I kind of want to be bold about like, this is what it is. Like, if you want to do my best job to explain, what Never Settles based on and what its roots are, and then follow that up by, doing my work as I'm serving the King, like, give it everything that we have, but not worry too much about, what are people going to think, and even to the extent of if this causes us to lose business or whatever, like that, I don't really care. It doesn't. That's kind of the least of my concern. So I'm in this place where I'm re-looking at what we've done, and I think, yeah, there's some areas for improvement, but I feel like we kind of make some small tweaks and then let it rest and let Father take care of that, and we just keep focused on, with our heads down in the current work we have and the clients we have.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, it kind of pulls in other variables too in terms of how do we make our decisions? It raises the topic, and we've talked about this extensively over the last week or two. Do we look to counsel from these high caliber, elite class businessmen who have all the experience in the world, or do we look to sort of spiritual leaders and mentors who have biblical wisdom and maybe not so much business experience? And maybe it's both. Maybe we pull both in, and this kind of brings in the context of who we're looking at for our potential board. And it's a fascinating question too, even in terms of people that we hire. Do we we always want to bring in people that challenge us, that are pushing us and elevating the bar so that we reach and stretch farther. And do we do that only in a business sense or a spiritual sense or both? And it's super hard. I mean, it's super hard to find people that challenge, and that help us stretch in both areas. So it's a really interesting dilemma because we want to surround ourselves with people that call us to a higher standard.
Yeah. So I would say, is there a way for us to land on a decision during this podcast just about our messaging and our branding and stuff? And to me, it feels like, do we need to wait to get counsel from our future board? What does the Bible say about this that we're talking about right now? And what decision are we going to make? And to me, I feel like we could go make some adjustments, but my vote right now would be, I'd love to leave it as it is, and every single product we develop, as long as I think every product that we want to develop, unless it was like a total donation and we want to point the light at somebody else or give, it was just truly just a gift or whatever. But outside that, if we create some new big product or whatever, I would be very inclined to have it say, a never settle company, and have no shame or fear or worry about what if people see, who we really are and they don't want to do business with us. I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with in terms of not worrying about what other people think, not letting fear or let what other people think affect our final decision. I think the huge value for me, the decision that I immediately said, well, one easy decision is let's relook at everything with this new perspective, because it was a blind spot. It was something that I was not even doing. So I think that is super valuable. Like and not only looking at what we have already, but what things that we put out in the future, with a mind towards that. And I like what you said, Ken. I think the goal is to how can we creatively remove the potential for stereotypes to be attached. You're never going to do that 100%, but I think we can be smarter and provide better language that removes some of those potential stereotypes. So I mean, I think I would like to look at just relook at everything, like.
And I would say without changing the message. I'd say keeping the message completely solid without changing, like, even if it goes to a stereotypical way, that would be more important to me than changing the message to make it appealing.
For sure. I agree with that. Shaw?
I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think thinking about the website and what can we change? What's the problem, I guess, is what I'm really trying to grasp. Is there a problem? And I know that's kind of just the same thing you were just asking, and I don't know, I think you're right, Andrew. It's just taking kind of an audit of what we have and see. Maybe I haven't looked at it in that
Mm-hmm.
light. Like I don't think we're over like we're beating anybody over the head with anything,
Mm-hmm.
um,
No, I don't think so
or
either.
anything like that.
And I mean,
Yeah.
if we ask 10 people what they think, we're going to get 10 different answers, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we could chase our tails all day trying to do that. But I think at the very least, like even um, with those who are close to us, as we form this board, um, just having the open question and saying, hey, this is our objective, like this is our core identity, and this is what we want to convey, and please hold us accountable to that. You know, raise any flags if you see something that either um, detracts from that, pulls away from, or contradicts that, or if something um, can be easily misinterpreted. And just having that accountability to say, hey, look, keep
Hmm.
evaluating what we are and what we present. And if anything kind of goes outside of those parameters of what we are trying to be intentional about, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah, I'm curious. You guys have any scriptures that come to mind about proclaiming your faith? You know, I mean, I know a lot of the new disciples after Messiah had died and raised again is very much a message of be bold in your faith. But what does that actually mean, right? Because there's ways to be a hindrance, or there's ways to be a connector and be a reflection of Messiah. And then I love that you said the word audit, Shawl. I have an email in my outbox, or not my outbox, my draft box right now to you too. And I
Hmm.
almost sent it to the whole company, but it's to you guys, and it said, and the subject is never settle audit. And um, and basically, I was rewatching Identity Crisis, a video on YouTube, and I loved um, that quote that he used from the Barna Group, and I'm gonna just bring that up one more time. I actually have it here on my desktop, and it just says, uh, yeah, I'm gonna read this because I was making sure it fits in context with what I'm gonna say, but it does. So this is from the Barna Group, and it says the problem facing the Christian church is not that people lack a complete set of beliefs. The problem is that they have a full slate of beliefs in mind, which they think are consistent with biblical teaching, and they are neither open to being proven wrong nor to learning new insights. It may be well that spiritual evaluation is so uncommon because these people fear that the results might suggest the need for different growth strategies or for more aggressive engagement in the growth process. No matter what the underlying reason is, the bottom line amount both the clergy and laity was indifference toward their acknowledged lack of evaluation. And so that's something that we've been classified as believers, right? And there's a big group of people that fit in that category. But um, as I was watching that video, he was talking. That was the beginning point, and then he was talking about why do companies and secular organizations and all this stuff have an audit every year, you know, maybe monthly. It's so far that it's an entire industry, and that there's companies that just do auditing for other companies, and it's a position within a company where you actually hire an auditor to come into your company and make sure, are we following the rules that we've agreed to? Are we following our operating agreement? Are we staying on target with the things that we've agreed to? But so few of us do an internal audit of our faith, right? We don't do an internal audit of what do we believe, like, hey, it's been a year or it's been a month or whatever, and I'm doing all these things, and I think they're for God, and I think I'm serving God, but when do we take a step back and do an audit and say, am I actually doing what He's called me to do? Is this, and really audit ourselves to the Word and to what the Spirit's convicting us to, or do we just get one truth and run with it for the rest of our lives and think that we have it, you know, set in stone? And so, I love that with Never Settle, right? As a company, we should be taking audits, but our audit should always be going back to the word and truth. And so in that email that I have sitting in my outbox to you guys, it's, hey, let's do an internal, I was proposing for you guys that we do an internal audit of Never Settle and give it to the entire staff, and everyone go to this place and say, are we doing what we said we were going to do? Does it align to our operating agreement? And is there anything that we're doing that isn't honoring to God? And give everyone a chance to raise that flag. And I think this could be part of that, right? Is our messaging consistent with what we believe and what we want to portray?
Yeah, that's really good. I love that idea. And to tie it back, you asked the question about verses, and it's kind of a I'm going to say stereotypical verse, which I don't like to label things at all, but it's a common verse. The question: what's our what's our footprint on the planet? What's our approach to how we conduct ourselves and how we, whether in business, in our family life, in our communities, whatever, and that would be in Matthew 5, kind of looking at Matthew 5:13 through 15. And then, of course, it says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt becomes tasteless, how shall it be seasoned? For it is no longer of any use but to be thrown out and trampled down by men. You are the light of the world. It is impossible for a city to be hidden on a mountain. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand. It shines to all those in the house." And of course, we have to remember culturally, contextually, back then there wasn't electricity, there wasn't big city lights, there wasn't any of this stuff, and so you could literally see a city on a hill from miles and miles and miles, especially at night, from the torches and the lamps and everything else. And it would basically, I mean, there was no other light, and so from anywhere around. In fact, Jerusalem was often called the city on a hill, and especially during some of the feast times, particularly Sukkot, tabernacles, there were these massive torches that they would light, and it was a massive celebration for a week. And that's how Jerusalem became known as the city on a hill, and it was literally called in those days the light of the world. That adds color to Yahushua's statements, "I am the light of the world." But Jerusalem was known as the light of the world, particularly because of the Feast of Tabernacles, when these massive torches were on, and it
You're cutting out a bit, Andrew.
A lot bit.
a lot bit.
The last thing we heard is Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Bummer. Well, I'm not. Which Jerusalem? Did you hear it a few times?
Yeah.
No, just the city on the light in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Anyways, Jerusalem was known as the light of the world, and because of how bright it was at the Feast of Tabernacles, it could be seen from miles and miles, tens if not hundreds of miles away, because of just the brightness of that city. So as a parallel to our lives, right? Like if we have truth, and if we're walking in that truth, it'll be impossible to hide it, and we shouldn't try.
And I think we're called to be reflections of Messiah, right? Like he said, these places lighten us, and we're supposed to be light in dark places. I should find that verse for the podcast, but he speaks to, to be light in dark places. And so I totally agree with that, and I think, what does that look like for Never Settle? But it definitely doesn't look like putting, the kids' song, "Don't put a thing over your light, I'm going to let it shine."
Put it under a bushel. No.
Yeah, so I think we want to do it in a way that's honoring to God, right? And
yeah, and at the same time being wise about it too, being wise as serpents, harmless as doves, because there's so much, not even just the stereotypes, but there's been so much damage done historically by people who have had the same language, who have had the same essential verbiage, and they've come through and they've done a lot of damage with those apparent beliefs, but they weren't walking in them, and so that's why it's tricky.
I agree, and I think it's going to go back to our actions, right? Our actions are always going to speak louder than our words, and I think if we love the world, like if we really, and I'm not saying in love with the world, but if we love God's people, right?
People, yeah.
The people that God has created in His image, right? He has 7 billion reflections of Himself on the planet. It's an important, like His image is important to Him. If we love His people, right? People that are created in His image, if we love them well, we'll be a witness. We will be a light on the mountain. And so, like Matthew 5 is just packed with so much stuff. Like we could just read the whole chapter, but going into that, like, love, action-based love, not thinking or wanting something or somebody doing something, but Matthew 5 talks about that, and it says, "You heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you, so that you become sons of your Father in the heavens, because He makes His sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love the For if you love those loving you, what reward have you? Are the tax collectors not doing the same too? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than others? Are the tax collectors not doing so too? Therefore, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And being perfect, that's a huge calling there. But the point of that is like, can we do that? Like, I feel like that's, how do we love those that persecute us? How do we love those that disagree with us? And there's some personal stories that I don't think that would not be right to share on the podcast, but I'm hopeful that the people that have disagreed with us on theological things or faith things have felt that no matter what, we love them in that. And I think that would be the witness, and I think that's the calling for us to continue to do. So can our messaging and everything we do in the company not be segregated, right? Can we not pull ourselves away from the world, but can we be a light in a world? And can we work with people that disagree with us, that believe different things, but love them through our actions, speaking light and giving a reflection back to God?
Yeah, I think that's super critical, even thinking of it in terms of shifting more away from words and more towards actions. Because like you said, that's going to be the final witness, is what we actually do, regardless of what we say.
Yeah, so how do you have actions? How does a company have actions?
I think, it's reflected in like quality of product and things like that. It's interesting because I'm like thinking about like we have, like you were talking about, relationship with people and all that, and I think there's a lot of actions to be had in those relationships, and sometimes like I don't know, doing something that like is more, maybe not benefit you, but would benefit, or the company, but would benefit the relationship, like and just being like honest and not being like deceptive and like how things are done, like, and that doesn't mean you have to lay it every single detail out like for every project or client relationship, but I think just being honest like as much as possible and early and like all that is like super huge, and I think I'd like to think we do that now fairly well, and and then I think about like products and stuff like that, like and the branding that might go along with it, and all that, and it's just like quality, right? Like if someone's going to be able to trace some product back to us and understand like we're attached to the king, that product better be good, like, or I'd like it to be good, and if it's not, saying, and if it's brought up or something and they're like, oh, this doesn't work, and be like, you are right, like how can we make that, it's like, it's almost like we have to be good at customer service and like things like that, because that's the relationship, like even though it's through a piece of software or a product, a physical product, like it's kind of weird to think about, but that's kind of,
Yeah.
That's good. I think that's really
That's
good.
good.
Customer face.
Because I think everything that we do, like you're asking the question, what do we, as a company, how do we do things? And I think we interface through relationships, right? And so it always comes back to, in every relationship, treating that other person or that other company, that other entity, the way we would want to be treated. And that comes into so many areas. Even doing things because it's right, even if it's to our own harm. And even just, it's hard. And where's that line? Like, how do you balance? Because obviously, we can't spend 40 hours a week on customer support for free with our free version of our plugins, right? But still, there's an element of when someone has a problem with our free plugin, it's like I always feel like, hey, if I was that person and I was stuck, I would want someone to dive in there with me, and so it's an interesting balance to try to do that without without being irresponsible with our overall resources at the same time.
well, I even think like something like that, like some of it might just be the communication, like, and just being honest. It is another opportunity to be honest, right? Like, oh, you know what, we can't offer the level of support like on that free plugin that you need, and like we're sorry about that, but our resources just can't handle it. However, we're really glad you tried it. Maybe make a suggestion, like whatever, and try to like send that person off, whether it's to our pro plugin or something else, a tool that we know of or something, like, so that they can have a good experience and that they feel acknowledged, whether we are able to solve their problem or not. Like, I don't think we can solve everybody's problem,
Hmm.
Yeah, even sending
It's how
someone
it
to a
is.
competitor, sending someone to a competitor's product if that's going to be better for
Hmm.
them. Kind of just these sort of
Hmm.
um, anti-business sense, anti kind of is the opposite of what would be common business sense. But it's a lot of times like kingdom logic defies world logic. Like the two don't mix ever really.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
And I
Man,
think
I've been challenged in that a ton lately.
all these things. I think those are all great examples, and I think those are things we should continue doing and grow in, and um, they're they're great. And the cool part is a lot of that stuff will never nobody will ever know, but that's the right way to do it, right? Like those aren't things that we should necessarily be broadcasting. So it's is there anything in our messaging that we should be broadcasting? But I do think that most of it will be in our actions, and I love what you said, Shaw. Like just the examples you brought up, those are great things that we should focus on. And I think the other piece is as a company, right? Luke 12:34 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also." And um, so what we invest to, what we spend our money on, how we manage our finances will be a testimony or a witness to the world, even if nobody knows about it, right? Regardless,
Hmm.
God's going to see it, and the things that we support are building. They're doing good or bad, right? So it's not even that anybody has to know anything, but are we paying our employees what they're worth? Are we
Hmm.
are we investing into things? Are we giving back? Are we, what are we doing with our finances? Because um, I don't know this for sure because I've never counted, but I've heard that Jesus talks about money more than anything else, and I don't know if that's true or not. But I've heard that from a lot of different people. But I do know it's an important it's an important topic, and I think really, yeah, like when you open up your bank statement and you look at what you spend your money on, like you can see like that's the stuff that's important to you, so
as well as time you can and that's where I mean that's super convicting because if we kept a chart every day of every minute or even just every hour
Let's
of
not
how we
talk about
spend our time. Yeah, let's not go too far down that. Let's not go there.
Yeah, oh
But I
man.
think this.
So yeah, speaking of the chart, like I was thinking the other day, I was like, what would it look like to tithe like on a daily basis, like your time? What is that, 2.4 hours or something? I'm really bad at math, so that might have screwed up. What is
Yeah, or
two
even I've
point?
had the same thought, but say of waking hours, right? Like I would do it by waking hours.
Hmm,
So say you're awake generally what 12 to 16 hours, well hopefully like 16 hours a
like
day in
16
theory.
hours, yeah.
well, it's interesting, like waking hours, but like there's 24 hours in a day. Like if I'm gonna give God 2.4, I might have to sacrifice some of my sleep. That's something that I can give Him, and
Hmm.
which sucks. Like
Hey, unless you're able to hack your sleep and only need 6 hours a day.
that's right. Hey, I'm gonna start working on 2 hours a day. Just kidding.
um, but yeah, and I think, sorry, did you finish that? Because I thought that was going to go deeper because that was really good. But yeah, like I've had the same thought, and it's one of those things that scares me because like, could I ever be that disciplined to seriously like sit down and carve out 1 to 2 hours a day, which sounds like, I mean, ultimately it's nothing, but it's the same way like Mint.com will print out, here's where all your money went this month, right? And what if we had a program that magically showed us where our time went every month? This month you spent X amount of hours on this and X amount of hours on this.
Hmm.
We'd probably be horrified. And I've had the thought of like we get to the end of our lives and we're before the throne and Father's like, man, you spent 5 years doing this activity that was completely worthless. That
Hmm.
was completely wasted. You wasted 5 years of your life on this. You wasted 1 year of your life on this. Like in the aggregate, what is that going to look like? And
Hmm.
that is super humbling and convicting when you start to datify the specifics of where things go.
You're making up
And
more
that's
words
another.
than me this week.
What's that?
I said you're making up more words than me, except for the difference is that you do it intentionally.
You do it intentionally sometimes.
Sometimes.
Um, and I think that's the value, another value of establishing a board, like just even beyond the traditional business sense of piloting, steering, advising a company. I mean, in our own lives, I think I don't want to have the blind spots that we don't know we have, and I think like one example, even last week's Torah portion was the story of Moses and Jethro comes in and he says, "What you're doing is not good. Like you're trying to manage all these people by yourself, and you're gonna burn out." And he advises Moses to appoint, elders, to manage the smaller issues and to kind of have effectively a leadership team. And that was in Exodus 18.
Mm.
And actually, we can jump over there real quick, 18, 18, and 19. Um, and super interesting to look at it to look at that story from a business perspective and kind of realize sort of the principle going on there.
Hmm.
I think it's really interesting. And this is
I think
Jethro now talk. Oh, go ahead.
go for it.
Cool. Um, so Jethro is saying to Moses, he's saying, "Both you and these people with you shall certainly wear yourselves out, for the matter is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it by yourself. Now listen to my voice. Let me counsel you, and Elohim be with you. Stand before Elohim for the people, and you shall bring the matters to him." And so then, of course, he goes on and describes how to set up, not really tribal leaders, but divisional leaders, where the smaller matters can come to the divisional leaders, and then the larger matters could come to Moses. But that kind of that core word counsel in the middle of there, um, just here's someone from the outside injecting himself, into his son-in-law's life and saying, "Let me give you counsel. Like you're missing this. You've got this blind spot, and you need some help here." And so I want to be intentional about pulling that counsel into Never Settle and into our lives, rather than waiting for something to get so broken someone has to intervene and help us out.
And I think this is interesting about this topic is we've been talking about this since before we founded the company officially and the importance of it. And I think we all understand the importance of mentorship, and we've all grown deeply in that, both being mentors and being mentored. And we've recognized it as a need for the company, but never put enough effort to it. And something that was really cool is we started praying about this stuff, and we said, "Father, align us." And we prayed as a team together and said, put your heart's will in our hearts, and help us make the right decisions for the company. And where are the things? And this idea of like a board came up pretty strongly. And then not only just a board, but like an answer to the board. Because one of the reasons that we haven't had a board to date, I would say an official board. We have a board of people that oversee what we're doing, and we bounce things off of, but we haven't had an official board. And but one of the reasons we haven't is we don't know who that should be. We've never like really landed on who that should be. And in praying about this stuff, like God like brought up like almost within days the people that we think He's called on our board. Now, I don't know if they're going to think they're supposed to be on our board, because almost every single one of them is way outside of our league, but we believe that He put these on our heart. And that was, to me, that's a really huge testimony and just an answered prayer. And it just shows like when we put something before the altar, He showed up really big. So this blind spot in this area for growth that we've needed for a year and a half we haven't had, then we really were intentional about putting our biggest needs in front of Father, and He brought this up, showed us what that was, and we think has shown us a solution to that, or the answer. And so now we want to reach out to these people that we probably have no business talking to, but we believe that Never Settles something that we've been entrusted with. We want to be the best stewards possible, and we know that we need people way outside of our league to make Never Settle the best that it can be, so that we can be the best stewards that God's called us to be with us.
And I'm supposed to be writing that letter this week. I'm
Yeah.
writing it in my brain. It's getting close. It's intimidating. I mean,
It
like
makes me
some of
want to
these
like
people.
send this podcast to them. Say, hey, this is why we need you.
Yeah, watch this. You're invited. Yeah, it is a little intimidating. I'm like, it's so. I even just figured out an introduction. I've got like the middle part kind of worked out, and obviously the logistics are easy because we've discussed, the time commitment that we're going to ask for, and just the sort of the general way it will work. But even well, there's been a lot of other distractions this week too. But I'm going to get there. But it's exciting. It's intimidating. And ultimately we're confident that Never Settle belongs to the Almighty, Yahweh of hosts, and He's going to bring the people that He wants to help advise His project. This is His project. We're just stewards. We're caretakers. He's going to line that all up, and so it's almost like we just have to walk it out, and the doors will close where they're supposed to close, and probably unexpected doors will open where they're supposed to open. Um, So that's exciting. But
Yeah. Man. Well, I don't know. I feel like we're
probably,
coming to a winding down place. So now we have that. Yeah, we just have to walk that out. And it sounds
yeah,
like we're all in alignment on messaging for the site, but we'll do an internal evaluation. And I propose, and I think you guys have already agreed, but we do an audit on everything we've done. And we give everyone in the company, all staff, an opportunity to speak into that as well, and to hold us accountable to the things that we've set out to do. And
absolutely.
then
And I think,
maybe
I know I was going
showing
to say,
our future board that as well, right? Like, hey, here's our operating agreement. Here's the word, here's the Bible, and we ask that if you see things that we're blind to, that you would hold us accountable to those. Help us make the corrections needed to stay on that target.
yeah, and I would say every time, I mean, that's a perfect opportunity, right? Anytime someone new joins the Never Settle family in any capacity, the board members, new employees, whatever, like that's a perfect opportunity for posing that question, because they've got the freshest perspective coming in without, sort of being internal. They've got that external perspective initially, and that's a really valuable thing to kind of walk through that process. And I think we want to maintain that. We never want to be so big that certain people come on, employees, whatever, and they don't have a voice on who we are or how we present ourselves. I think we want, because some of the best value comes from all levels.
Hmm.
Um,
And I think, yeah, it's going to be twofold. So the new people, but there's also huge perspective in the employees that are working every week. And there's this like thing where they're building up, and I've seen it in lots of companies where people on the um, producer level are, they're like, man, that management team is full of lies, right? They're just spewing BS out left and right. Like, they keep saying this, but this is what we're doing, right? And so I want to give a platform and a voice to people that are internal, and like to give them the opportunity to say, hey, like, you guys, you proclaim this, you say this, but I see something different, and see what comes up, and give and ultimately it's because we don't want to get off course, I mean, it'll only
yeah,
benefit us, and
yeah,
so.
no, that's really meaty. Like, just and fostering an environment that makes sure that's always, that we're always open to that kind of feedback. Um,
Absolutely.
to kind of put a nice little bow on it, then Proverbs 1:5 says, "The wise one hears and increases learning, and the understanding one gets wise counsel." Um,
Yeah. And
so
Saul, I mean, all of Proverbs is chalked with,
it is, yeah,
before you go to war, get counsel, like,
yeah.
basically
20, I
anything
think
that's
that's
major important.
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, Proverbs 15:22, 2018, Isaiah 29:15. Lots of good stuff on that.
Shaw, any final thoughts?
No, man, it's good stuff. Like I'm excited to like kind of take a look because yeah, it's been over a I don't know. Well, it's been what, a year, more than a year
Year
now.
and a half. Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, like re-looking at that stuff and asking those questions are really, really important. And I see the correlation to personal life, as well. And I think not only for a business, but like it's a good thing to do like individually and just yeah, am I doing what I say? Like are we collectively as a business and and then each of us just as men with our families and stuff, because I'm always saying, yeah, I want to know a father better, what am I doing like to make that happen? Um, can I do more? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I being obedient when I read something and like all that? Um, but yeah, it's good. Like it's a good challenge for us, and I'm excited to go over it and make those tweaks. I think there's definitely some tweaks we can make, but also just still walk in boldness and kind of proclaim like what he's done for us and I just don't see how we can separate it. So like and I don't think we're trying to, which is great.
Mhm.
It's cool.
Awesome.
Good
Well,
stuff.
until next time, hopefully we're a little more consistent about these with less gaps in the middle.
Yeah, we missed a few weeks there,
Yeah.
but get it
Well,
back on track.
hopefully we'll see you next week.